The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning. I haven't gotten used to how fast that is, but I'm caught off guard every time. Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. We're wishing everyone happy Diwali around the world. And we hope that it is free from darkness and filled with abundant light for those of you who are celebrating Diwali this morning. I hope I've said Diwali correct. Correct me if I'm wrong. Anyway, I'm Shannon Penrod and excited to be here as your host for the next hour, talking about autism from a 360-degree perspective. We are coming to you live. Today is the 4th of November. It is 2021. We are still doing the show from remote studio at my house, although we're hopeful that in 2022, at the beginning of 2022, that will change. Fingers crossed. We're working on it. So thrilled to be here with you now as part of the Autism Network. And that's a very exciting thing. You guys are going to start to see changes to the website, I'm told, today. So that will be super fun. Don't panic. Nothing is static. We're going to make real-time changes to the website as we go. So that'll be super fun. Also want to let you know that a little later on the show, we are going to have our guest, Bonnie Yates. She's a special education attorney. She's going to be here with us. She's gone back to the beginning to talk to us about the very basics of special education. You guys can write in your questions to her throughout the week, but that's the topic that she's going to start hitting. We started it last week, but she's going to continue on today. The 101 of special education, which is super interesting and fun, I think. Because if you can get that cooking, if you can get education cooking and productive, it's sort of like set it and forget it, you know, the old Ron Popeil thing. If you get a good IEP and you get your services in place, then you get a year where you just have to check in and breathe. And then you can go and attend to other things, knowing that while your child is in school, productive things are happening. If you don't take care of the school piece, right, then you have nothing but heartache all year long. And that is the truth of it, right? And a good, solid IEP doesn't absolutely ensure you have a good, solid educational year, but it really is a step in the right direction. Now, you will notice our fabulous Traven is showing you all the different ways that you can connect with us here. I mentioned that we're live. We're live right now on YouTube, on Twitter, on Facebook, and about a dozen other places. But what I love is that you have the opportunity to interact with us through a lot of those. So if you're on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter right now, pop a comment in the chat and tell us hi and where you're watching from. I love to know where you're watching from. You don't have to, but it's a super fun thing because this show is meant to be interactive. You know, I always say at the start of the show that we have lots of experts. I'm not one of them. I'm an autism mom and a proud autism mom. I'm a former teacher. I was just saying this morning to somebody, I just want to be a student in the front row of the classroom. You know, that student who's like raising their hand and going, "Ooh, I want to know more about that." That's me. That's what I want to be. But that doesn't mean that I know everything. I don't know anything. I know very few things. Let's say that. But I'm happy to be here and be a resource because we've been doing this for more than 10 years. In fact, I've been hosting shows about autism now for more than a baker's dozen of years. And so what I've met are experts. And so I can say to you, you know, if you write in, I can say, you know, who's the person to ask about that, right? And then sometimes we can get them on the show. So write into us, tell us where you are, tell us what you're looking for, the questions that you have, so that we have an idea of what kind of programming that you want to do. But don't confuse me with one of the experts. Confuse me with somebody who's really wanting to be a cheerleader for you. And when I say you, let's talk about that. This whole show is meant to be for that larger autism network. Of course, that's individuals who are on the autism spectrum themselves, as the new hashtag is actually autistic. But it also includes everyone who loves those individuals. I think that makes sense, right? That together that we can be good allies and help each other to get to the place that we want to get to, which is the place that is rich with resources and supports and respect and employment and opportunity for individuals on the autism spectrum. Doesn't that sound luscious? Doesn't that sound absolutely fabulous? That's what I want. I know that if you're here, you want that as well. Then there's so much to be talked about in between all that, what the day-to-day is, and that's really personal and individual. So I like to say I'm not a mind reader, so I don't know what you need. So write in and tell me what you're looking for, and then maybe hopefully we can help you to connect to some, if not some answers, more questions that help you to be able to ask them of experts so that you can get to the answer that you're looking for. Sound good? And also we encourage you to share. If you find something here that you like, share. And I'm not talking about Sonny and share. I'm talking about share. We love Danny Bowman, and Danny Bowman says, sharing is caring. And so I'm going to quote Danny Bowman, that if you see something here, share it with somebody that you know that could benefit from this information. That's what keeps us on the air. So we appreciate your help with letting people know that we're here and that we want to be of support. Information and inspiration. That's the key of the day. Now, at the start of the show on Thursdays, we always like to treat you to what we fondly refer to as the jargon of the day. This is when we take on one word, one phrase, one acronym. We try to figure out what in the hey nani are those experts talking about? Why do we need to know this? Is this just something to hurt our heads? And sometimes I'm not convinced it isn't just to hurt our heads. But I love today's term. This term for me, this phrase for me opened up a whole bunch of doors as a mom of an individual on the spectrum. So theory of mind. Now, keep in mind, first we give you the actual definition, which often is of no use to anyone unless you have extra letters behind your name, and sometimes not even then. Then we give you a working definition where we try to really break it down into something that's understandable. So let's do that right now with theory of mind. Let's take a look at what our actual definition of theory of mind is. And then we'll see if we can make fun of it. Theory of mind is being able to infer the full range of mental states, beliefs, desires, intentions, imagination, emotions, etc. that cause action. In brief, too late for that, right? Having a theory of mind is to be able to reflect on the contents of one's own and others' minds. And that's a direct quote from Simon Baron Cohen. It's not the worst definition, right? I got to say, it does a little bit of perspective taking by assuming that we don't know a bunch of psychological terms, right? But if I'm somebody who's on the spectrum and doesn't have a huge background in psychology, or I have a kiddo on the spectrum, I might still be like, well, that sounds great, but I don't really know what you're talking about. So let's move on to our working definition and see if we can't make heads nor tails of this. Theory of mind is being able to understand the idea of thinking and recognize what you are thinking is not what others are thinking. This is perspective taking. It is the understanding of the fact that there is a conversation happening in my head that is not the same conversation that you are having in your head. What? Like, that is mind-blowing to some individuals. What I'm thinking and seeing and feeling is not the same as what you are thinking, seeing, and feeling in this moment. It's powerful stuff. Now, what's really interesting and what blew my mind the first time I heard about theory of mind, I was always asking, as a mom of a newly diagnosed child, I was like, what is it? What is autism? What is the difference between autism and, ADHD? What is the difference between autism and an intellectual disability? What is autism? Can you put it in a box for me? Can you define it for me? And of course, that's a tough one, because autism, there's a menu of things, and if you have enough of them, you can qualify for autism, but some of those things could be other things, right? So it's super tough. I was like, so what's the difference between autism and everything else? And then someone explained to me the theory of mind and the Sally Ann test. And we've talked about this many times before on the show. Let's see if I can do it without messing it up. So children are told this story and shown pictures. And in the story, there's two little girls. One is Sally and one is Anne. And Sally has a ball. And in one picture, she's holding the ball. And in the story, they tell kids, now Sally is asked to hide the ball. And Sally goes and hides the ball and she puts it underneath the table. Great. Anne watches her put it underneath the table. And then they ask Anne to step outside into the hallway. And then in the pictures and in the story, they say to Sally, while Anne is outside in the hallway, they say to Sally, take the ball and put it someplace else. And so Sally takes it and puts it inside of a box. And then they ask the child, if Anne comes back into the room, where will she say the ball is? Because what this test does is asks the child to put themselves not in Sally's mind, not in their own mind, but in Anne's mind, to say, with the information that Anne has, what will she say? And the correct answer is that the last place that Anne saw it, which was underneath the table. Anne has no knowledge that it got put in the box. We know, Sally knows, the child knows. Anne's the only one who's not in on it. So they ask the child, where's the ball? Now and I was like, okay, will a child know that? Is that developmentally appropriate? And the thing is that around age 5, children start to make this arc where they start to notice this. Now they spend the rest of their lives perfecting this. And we all struggle with perspective taking at some point in our life, right? But it burgeons, it starts to come out around age 5. So here's what blew my mind. When Simon Baron-Cohen originally did the Sally Ann test, they decided to do it with 3 groups of people. They took a group of 5 and 6-year-olds that were neurotypical. They took a group of 5 and 6-year-olds that had autism spectrum diagnosis. And by the way, Zesty wants to know, is the box made of transparent glass? No, it is not. So the box, you can't see that the ball is inside the box, nor can you see that it was behind the table. So the ball is invisible. Good point. Which makes me think of Hannah Gadsby. She has a joke about that in her stand-up routine. They ask her something about the cereal and what's in the cereal, and she's like, is the cereal box made of cardboard? So love that, Zesty. But in any case, they had these 3 groups. So they had the neurotypical kids, they had the kids on the spectrum, and then they had a group of kids who had Down syndrome. And all between the ages of 5 and 6, and they interviewed them, showed them all the pictures with the Sally Ann, told them the story, and asked them the question, where will Anne say the ball is? Remember, the correct answer is that Anne will say it's the last place she saw it, which was behind the table. Well, so the neurotypical kids, passed the test and got the correct answer by far. The kids on the spectrum, most of them got it wrong. They said it's in the box because they knew it was in the box. Okay, this doesn't shock or surprise me. What shocked and surprised me is that the kids with Down syndrome got it right. And I went, okay, there's something different here. If kids with Down syndrome are getting this right and kids on the spectrum weren't, what is the difference? And for whatever reason, this perspective taking skill, and we can theorize why, doesn't pop up with kids on the spectrum as early as it does for other kids. And if we don't make a concerted effort to teach it, often it lags behind considerably. We all know somebody on the spectrum or off the spectrum that struggles with this, that they cannot see another person's point of view. Listen, I have a relative, and I'm not going to name names, right? But who will sit there and say to you, I'm so upset because someone did this thing to me. And you can say to them, yes, that's absolutely terrible. That's horrible. And then in the next sentence, they can tell you that so-and-so is not speaking to them. And you ask why, and they go, and they tell you it's exactly what they were just so upset at the other person doing. And you try to get them to see that it's the same, and they can't. They do not, they're like, no, it's not the same. And when you ask them, why is it not the same? They will say, because I needed to do this. And so I had the right to do that. They shouldn't be upset with me. Well, then how does that apply to the first story when you're upset about it and they say it doesn't? It literally, there is a block. They don't see that as being the same. Now, there's some rigidity for that because this person is significantly, they're an adult, right? They're not a 5-year-old. What we know, here's the cool part, is it's totally teachable. And the younger you teach it, the easier it is. Totally teachable. Zesty wants to know, so is this a neurophysical trait or learned? And I don't know the answer to that, Zesty, and I don't know that the research has absolutely pinned this down. Why do some kids learn it, and why do a great portion of kids on the autism spectrum not learn it in the same time frame as those other kids on their own without support? I don't know that we 100% understand it yet, but if you're really interested in it, this is Simon Baron-Cohen's entire, what he's devoted his life to, is to understanding this particular thing, the theory of mind. Why is it not there in kiddos on the spectrum? How is it taught? How is it a benefit to people on the spectrum? We talked about this in the news the other day, that often this lack of theory of mind is mistakenly diagnosed as being a lack of empathy, which is so much steaming poo. It just isn't the truth. People on the spectrum, very smart, very empathetic, very caring. But if I don't understand the basic comment that I'm having an experience thinking in my head, and you're having an experience thinking in your head, and that they are different, and that, then I don't have a foundation to build a whole bunch of perspective taking skills on. And Zesty says, sounds like genetics might play a strong role. Very possible. We know that there are genetic components, and we know that there are environmental components, and we don't know. I wonder, because as somebody who is a former teacher, and when you build, there's always like a skill that starts something, right? I used to say when I would teach, I taught junior high and high school for a long time, and kids would come in the classroom at the beginning of the year, and I would go, okay, I'm looking at Swiss cheese, and I got to find where the holes are, because these kids are all brilliant, they're all bright, but there's little pockets where they're missing things. And I was teaching gen ed classrooms, but I had kids that were on the spectrum in my classroom. But all of them across the board had holes in what they knew. And I knew as a teacher, if I could identify where the hole was and shore up the missing core skill, that kid would fly, that kid would be able to learn all kinds of things, because we shore up those splinter skills. So for me, this is exciting, because as a former teacher, if we have the ability to take young kids and teach them theory of mind, and have them understand the concept that I'm thinking and feeling things, and what you're thinking and feeling is different, we change their ability to move through the world, but also we change the world. I say all the time, I don't want to just teach this to folks on the spectrum. I want to teach this to everybody. Like, if we could sit down, think about all the problems that we have in the world right now, all of them are solved. All of them are solved by perspective taking. If we could stop for a moment and think, what must it be like to be that person? And what are the things that they need and want? Then I will come to the conversation with compassion. I will come to the conversation without defense and say, I'm not having that experience. I'm participating in a study right now with a group of autism moms, and there was something that came up the other day in conversation, and somebody was saying, I really need this, this, and this. Because we were being asked a question, they said, I feel very strongly, and I want this, and I need this. And I said, oh, that's so interesting. I totally see why you want that. I just want to throw in my 2 cents. I feel the exact opposite way. And then we had a discussion about it. We could both go, wow, that's interesting. I never thought about it from your point of view, why you would want that and why I don't want that. It was great, edifying conversation. And I think for the researchers afterwards, they said, it was so great to hear that it's not this like cut and dried thing that some of you want this and some of you want this, and that there's reasons behind that. I think we were all super excited about that. So perspective taking, now that I've watched my son be taught perspective taking and got to go through the lessons with him, I notice all the time how much of the world fails to do perspective taking, and how much of the world fails to do perspective taking when it comes to individuals on the spectrum. That a lot of times, and I also have been guilty of this, and my son has pointed it out to me, and my good friend Alex Plank points it out to me. There was a day when I was saying to my son, I need for you to get out of the car in this way because it's a safety issue and you're making me crazy and I need for you to do it this way. And he was saying, can't I do it this way? And I was saying, no, I need for you to do it this way. And my son, 9 years old, said to me, Mom, that seems very inflexible. That's a sign of autism. Do you have autism? And I was like, oh my gosh, first of all, that is me being inflexible. And that I need to, as much as I know my thing was about safety, that I need to ask him, why are you wanting to get out of the car the other way? Let's start with what's your perspective on that? And that I have to be more mindful of that. So Sarah says, is it possible that the skills appear at 5, but it's developing before that? And if so, how can we teach them at 2 and 3? Well, Sarah, you get the gold star, because truthfully, you're right. It starts to burgeon at 5. But if we go back to that idea of there's a core skill and where is it missing, we see that for kiddos on the spectrum, one of the first place where it starts to not be there when we need it to be there is joint attention. That a lot of kiddos on the spectrum are more interested in a whole set of other things than joint attention. So one of the things that we recommend when we say early intervention, starting as early as possible, is start building in a whole set of cognition skills that include and start with joint attention. Joint attention is when I'm looking at something and the child looks at me then and says they're looking at something. They follow. So let's say we're at the zoo and I'm looking at a giraffe. The child sees me looking at the giraffe and having a reaction to the giraffe. So now they look at the giraffe, right? So it's this 3 points of attention. We're both looking at the giraffe now. And then the child and I look at each other and go, oh, it's a giraffe, right? And there is this moment of communication that happens. And in that moment, there's so much that's happening because the child notices me looking at the giraffe and they notice my reaction to the giraffe. And we know that kids imprint with that. So if mom gets tense whenever there's a dog around, the child will be more likely to be afraid of dogs because of joint attention. But on the spectrum, a lot of kids don't get that joint attention in the time span that they're supposed to, and they miss all that information on our faces about, oh, giraffes must be fabulous because mom's face told me they were fabulous. And we know that that joint attention piece also is the building block for every single social skill we'll want to teach later on. And guess when we can start teaching joint attention? When they're born. So isn't that cool? Isn't that fun? Zesty says, is theory of mind a gradient or all or nothing? Might someone with a deficit properly attribute positive emotions but not negative emotions? Absolutely. And we all have some, as you said, gradient of this, right? Some people do good perspective taking in party situations, but not at work. And some people are good at reading when people have positive emotions going on, but they don't notice when somebody's upset. And that is true of individuals on the spectrum and people, on and off the spectrum, right? So everyone, this is just it's a skill, and everybody applies it in different ways and different amounts, right? So I love this discussion with you guys. This is just a fascinating thing. So anyway, theory of mind, if you're interested, all you have to do is Google Sacha Baron Cohen. And if the name sounds familiar to you, it's not a coincidence. He is the cousin of Simon Baron Cohen, the comedian from Borat. And they look a little bit alike, but Sacha Baron Cohen is an expert in the field of autism. And this is his particular area of autism, theory of mind. It's fascinating stuff. All right. Now moving on to our question of the day, because we've got Bonnie coming here any second now. I don't want to be late for Bonnie. So our question today, we always ask you guys, and we love it when you write in, are you good at putting yourself in other people's shoes? And when and where are you good at it? You know, sometimes I feel like I've got this. And then I see, oh my gosh, I totally missed somebody's point of view on something, or even just missed that their point of view might be different than mine. And I think it's, you know, every day there are opportunities to take people's perspectives. Like right now I'm taking Bonnie's perspective, what it's like for her to sit and wait for me to finish this. And I know that last week I made her wait a long time. And this week I don't want to do that, because what must that feel like for Bonnie? She's here, she's got good information, and she has to listen to me yak, right? But some days I'm better at that than other days. And we all have to cut ourselves some slack. But are you good at it? Are you good at stopping to consider? Think about the last time that somebody ticked you off. Like, is there anybody you're mad at right now? Like, really furiously mad at? And have you tried to put yourself in their shoes and see what do they have going on? I know that sometimes I can be so furious with somebody about something, but then I remind myself, I don't really know what their story is. I don't know. I always love this story. My friend who was going through chemo, and she double parked her car to go in and get her mail because she just didn't have enough energy to walk all the way through the parking lot, because the parking spot that was available was clear across the parking lot. And she was driving a nice car, but really fighting for her life. And somebody came up to her and just lined her out and said, "You selfish, inconsiderate, you know, no good, like, how dare you double park, blah, 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 blah." And then my friend said, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I'm struggling to get my mail and going through chemo." And then the woman just burst into tears, the one who'd been yelling, and said, "Oh my gosh, I just lost my mom to cancer and I was having such a bad day and I'm taking it out on you." And they had this moment because for a minute they got to take each other's perspectives. You know, we never know for sure everything that's going on for other people. I do think it's the answer to peace, love, and happiness. And I love Zesty says, the best way I find to put myself in other people's shoes is when I spend a lot more time listening and asking questions and not trying to sell my ideas. It's a skill that takes practice and works well with mindfulness. Oh, Zesty. I just love that. We need to crochet that and put it on a pillow, right? Thank you. Thank you so much for that perspective today. And that's what good perspective taking can do all the way around. It's wonderful. All right. We've gone through the question of the day. Now we got the topic of the week. Oh, thank goodness. I'm like so into this conversation. I lost where I was. Thank you, Traven. So our topic this week is following through. That, to me, this is one of the skills that is the hallmark of success, that we start something and then we have to babysit it and follow through. And follow through and follow through. And sometimes, you know, the other day our term was executive functions. This is part of executive functions, is following through. When you start something, you might be great at the first phase of it, but then there are 12 steps before we get to goal. And you might not be great at steps 5 and 11, right? And that can make the difference of whether you achieve your goal. And it's super important. I love that Bonnie is here, because in a second we're going to talk about special education. And we talked a little bit earlier about how important it is. If you have a great IEP and your student is doing well in class, it really can make the difference of a great year. But a lot of times this is about follow through. Oh my gosh. Like, we have to follow through and call and say, did this happen? Did this happen? It can be debilitating. There are great executive function tools to help us. Like, there are apps that remind you, call this person today, or planners that have alarms on them that say, you have to do this to follow through. But just being mindful about the fact that follow through is a part of the gig. Whoo! it's big. It's a big part of success that I know a lot of us have like a burst of energy. We're like, I'm going to get something done. I'm going to do this. I'm going to make that phone call. I'm going to find it. I'm going to call 3 ABA providers to see if they've got therapists available. I'm going to start that. Right. And you do the first action, you call the ABA providers. And then 2 days later, when you haven't heard back from 2 of them, right, it's the follow through of calling back the one that called you and recalling the 2 that didn't call you. That's what seals the deal. So all a part of the perspective taking, all a part of the executive functions. Do you sense the theme here? So when you can, following through, one of the keys to getting good stuff done and having good stuff happening. Which brings me to Ms. Bonnie Yates, who's joining us right now from Tollner Law Offices. She is an amazing special education attorney, and she is joining us to talk more about the basics of special education. Bonnie, good morning.
Good morning, Shannon. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Well, I feel compelled to say this might be my most interesting, what do you call it, background.
I was going to say, you got it going on today.
Well, basically, I really do, because we're remodeling our house and living in the garage till some of it is done. So you've got all kinds of fun things in the background, like my stove that's covered with a sheet, and
I love it.
All the paint retardant. Yeah, you love it because you are seeing it from afar, not waking up in it, and trying to like make meals on a hot plate. And
oh, Bonnie, it's like you're camping, but not even glamping. It's horrible.
Totally, it's like non-glamping. I tell people it's like camping out but no beautiful nature.
Is it time to go on vacation, Bonnie?
It's supposed to be I don't know. But of course, since I'm camping with a guy who happens to be my husband, this is the guy that like his favorite thing is to almost run out of gas, but not run out of gas. So I think he thinks this is like very edgy.
Yeah.
And anyway.
So he's loving it.
No, I do have a hot shower. I'm very grateful for that. And I'm finding that I have to take a certain number of my meals out just sort of to get away from all the grimies. But anyway, I'm grimy, but I'm happy to talk about special ed. And we were working on special education rights and responsibilities. I'm talking to you courtesy of Tollner Law Offices, who employs me, luckily for me. We're a large special education disability rights firm. We cover all of California and Arizona as well. And if you want to reach us, you can do so by going to our website, and you can fill in there's forms if you want an intake or consultation and you're from California or Arizona. You can reach me by cell phone, 310-245-1968. See, what else am I supposed to say? Okay, so these are your rights. These are not necessarily your answers to your specific legal questions, but your rights help you, inform you when you analyze your own legal questions. But if you have a burning legal question, and who doesn't these days, I really recommend you have a consultation with an attorney in your own state. And to get started on that, you can go look at the list on www.copaa.net. That's the preamble. Where we left off last time is we're just doing this sort of like special education filibuster, or whatever you want to call it. We talked a little bit last time about basic rights. Shannon asked, are these the rights that you're given at the, when they email your, let's say, IEP invitation to you, or at the beginning of your meeting? And the answer is each district develops its packet or its law, its own governing rules as far as the parent rights. So the problem that I have with parent rights is they're oftentimes incomplete. The school district can kind of pick and choose what they want, and they run the risk if somebody is looking for something that's supposed to be there and it isn't there, of being challenged on it. But I just don't tend to see that particular issue coming up very much. But if they offer you your parent rights in e-form, stick them in your special ed file. Might be worth having later on. So the first question in the special education rights and responsibilities chapter 1 is, I hear a lot about federal and state laws and federal and state regulations. What's the difference? And we talked about that federal law is something which was originally the source of the IDEA. It was enacted by the 94th Congress in 1975. I don't even imagine we could ever get approval or agreement for a comprehensive statutory scheme like this now. But in 1975, this the precursor was called the Education for Handicapped Children, for All Handicapped Children Act. It later turned into the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act. And so, as part of that, if the states want to participate in the federal scheme of special education, they get federal money, but in exchange, they have to develop their own laws, and they have to, sorry, there's a plane going over. They have to offer at least as many rights as the federal government does. What are regulations? Regulations are things that are enacted after the fact to kind of fill in holes that maybe weren't covered by the federal or state law. Regulations also can tell you how something is to be accomplished rather than just that something is a legal right. So that's question 1. Question 2 sounds as if it might be boring, but it's really not. It's what is the definition of special education? And this is important for you. This is all theoretical. This is intended to help you understand that there's a framework for all of this. It's sort of like your ABA drill book. I mean, you really need this information, and then you can go to your IEP team and you'll have a context for some of this stuff, and you'll be able to see whether the district is acting legally or not. Sometimes districts act illegally because they feel they need to act illegally. Other times districts act illegally because they don't know the law. But anyway, let's just read this paragraph on the definition of special education, and then we'll see if Shannon has any questions. So special education means specially designed instruction at no cost to the parent to meet the unique needs of a child with disabilities. This instruction can include classroom instruction, home instruction, instruction in hospitals and institutions, instruction in other settings, and that's not further developed, and instruction in physical education. Special education also includes speech language pathology or any other related service if the service is considered special education under state standard. Travel, training, and vocational education. That's obviously for older students. Here's the example we were talking about earlier. California gives you something that the federal definition does not include. California adds to the federal definition of special education by requiring that special education be provided to those students with disabilities whose educational needs cannot be met with modification of the regular instructional program. So there's some key terms, and we're just going to go through them quickly. One is at no cost, okay? And at no cost means at no cost. And I've had cases throughout the years where districts have actually, it's not that common, but they've said things like, we have this really good paraeducator and she moonlights as a tutor, so you can hire her to work with your special education student at home. So at no cost means that all specially designed instruction is provided without charge, but does not preclude incidental fees that are normally charged to all students regardless of a disability. So if you had a football uniform that everybody had to pay for, that is not something that the IEP team has to exempt you from. They go on to talk about physical education, which is only interesting because the definition is much broader than you might think. It includes the development of physical and motor fitness, fundamental motor skills and pattern, and skills in aquatics, dance, and individual and group games and sports, including intramural and lifetime sports. The term also includes special physical education and adapted physical education, movement education, and motor development. Well, that's interesting because who among us has ever had any of those things except for adapted PE be part of our IEP? Specially designated instruction means adapting as appropriate to the needs of an eligible child. The content, methodology, or delivery of instruction to address the unique needs of the child that result from the child's disability and to ensure access of the child to the general curriculum so the child can meet the educational standards that apply to all children. And then there's a definition for travel training and vocational training as well. But do you have any questions at this point, Shannon?
I got to be honest, I'm just fascinated by all of this because I think there are so many things in there that people will go, I didn't know that was included in there.
Yeah,
I didn't know.
It's me, Shannon.
You know, it's very, and there are a couple of phrases that I'm hung up on. One of them was the phrase about something about if they're not able to do the accommodations to the curriculum, if they're not able to do them with modifications. Like that whole section was very interesting to me because what I've always been told is if modifications have to be done to the curriculum at all, then that student becomes special education. But this sort of made it sound like might be possible to have modifications to the curriculum be outside of special ed. Did I hear that wrong?
Well, I think the way the law works is that if you go back to the beginning, there's a preference always in special education for the least restrictive environment, and the presumption is that the student will go into general ed unless he or she can't. And so in order to allow access to the least restrictive environment, we give related services, accommodations, and modifications.
Yeah.
I don't believe those things are available to gen ed students without IEPs. But if a school wanted to, they could offer that. But I think the problem would be you're saying that the person passes the grade, but they really haven't met grade level standards. So that's one issue. Now, if you have a 504 plan, and some people do, 504 actually can include services. People don't know that, and you sure don't see people getting 504 services very often. But I think you could give accommodations, modifications, and services under 504. But
it's interesting. I didn't know that either.
But basically, special education, my thought about it is the education of every child is really precious and unique. And it's wonderful to see a little person open up and start to learn about the world and see them integrate that into their way of living. And
Bonnie, I'm going to stop you for a second. I think you covered with one of your papers, covered your mic a little bit. We can still hear you, but it's a little bit covered. Can you? Now it's better. Whatever you moved is better.
I don't have any papers, but I just move things around on the screen.
Okay.
Anyway, I've always felt that what I would like is a society where every child's education was being governed by a plan that was developed at the beginning of the year. And I wish we could individualize for everyone, not just students with a 504 plan or students with disabilities. But since we have the ability to individualize for students with an IEP, that's why we want to know what we're potentially entitled to so that we can come up with the best plan possible.
Yeah. I think people who watch the show know that I'm a former teacher, that I taught both college and then I went and taught after 9/11 in junior high and high school. And it was at a time when the political thought was there was no child left behind, but it was also there was this running theme of we want to have every single child get the exact same opportunity, which meant that I remember our principal saying to us, I want to be able to walk down the hallway and I want the doors open and all the people who are teaching 6th grade math, it will be as if I'm hearing a recording. And as I walk through the hallway, all the students are turning the same page at the same time. And of course, the teachers and the teachers union, we all lost our minds over it because we were like, where is the individualized education?
Yeah. It's very hard to move in this arena. Like, we had the issue in California at the beginning of the year where the AB, whatever it is, 104, I think, not AB 130, I think 104, said that for this year, independent study would be available, and it specifically exempted special education students from participating in independent study. I thought, well, that's good, because I don't want my kids to end up in independent study with no services.
Yeah.
Whereas two law firms that I highly respect saw that as discriminatory or discrimination, and I think that they're right. They said, how can you let everybody else have independent study and not make the option possible?
Yeah.
So we get into these situations where, like, is it good or is it bad? And it's always going to have to be, I think it's always going to have to be not cookie cutter, and look at the person and see what they need. I mean, I think that's
Exactly.
what the law says.
Exactly.
But that does come up a lot. You know, what one person wants, the other person thinks would be really the wrong thing for their child. The next question, which I know you guys are gonna love, is called, how can I get the school district to evaluate or assess my child? And so you all know that when a child is initially referred to special education, there's supposed to be an assessment in all areas of disabilities. In order to have those assessments kind of delineate for us or identify for us what the unique needs of the child are, such that he requires special education and related services to access the curriculum. So let's see how they answered it. Okay, they started even before eligibility. They said, your school district has an obligation to identify, locate, and evaluate all children with disabilities who may be eligible for special education, including those who are attending private schools or homeless or wards of the court. This is called Child Find. So Child Find is important, and periodically we get a Child Find case. I was doing one this week where the young lady was very academically capable, but she was having very severe mental health symptoms. And the district kept telling the parents, yeah, well, we're going to evaluate her, but we're not allowed to yet because of the pandemic. We're waiting for appropriate PPE before we can assess people. And they didn't get around to actually assessing her until September 2020, even though her parents had been asking for her to be assessed for, over a year. And so when the district overlooks a student like that, whether it's unintentionally or it's intentionally, that's a failure of their Child Find obligations, and it may result in the student being entitled to additional services, which we call compensatory services, to make up for the failure to properly and timely evaluate the child. That's Child Find.
And this is something that I wasn't aware of till you brought it up. I don't know, like 2 years ago. And I think a lot of people aren't aware. So I want to just back up for just a second and talk about this, because I think that a lot of time, having been on both sides of the equation, I've been a teacher in a classroom at a meeting talking about a student's behavior and heard people say, I think this kid needs some extra support. And I've heard people say, don't go that way. Don't go that way. Don't go down that path. We don't have a right to say anything to the parent.
Yeah.
You don't want to start that with the parent. We're not gonna open the Pandora's box to that. So it's shocking to me to now hear that we had a legal obligation to have that conversation and to refer that child. But on the other side, as a parent, I've also had the circumstance where I didn't know that teachers were sitting in around a room talking about my child and they didn't let me know. For parents that are watching that feel like probably a teacher did identify their child and that the school did nothing and nobody notified them, how would they go back now, Bonnie? Obviously they would come to a lawyer like yourself, and how do you unveil all that to get to the point where they give money? Do you have to have written proof that they had identified the child and didn't tell?
I think every Child Find case is unique. I think that school districts don't like to keep emails from parents.
Yeah.
They don't like to keep correspondence from parents. I want everyone in the audience to know that 99% of the time, when I get school district records, there are no emails, there are no student work samples, there's no data. So proving your child find issue is going to be different in different circumstances. In the case that I just mentioned, the young lady was the subject of multiple hospitalizations over and over again, psychological issues, very serious issues. And the parents were doing things like writing the district and saying, help, she's in the hospital, we need to get her homework. I mean, they got more informed, and then they got more specific. But really, at the moment that the school district is notified that a child is in a psychiatric hospital and is going to be there for an unknown amount of time, I think that triggers the duty to assess. A lot of the time you have stuff come up in the classroom that the classroom teacher sees, and he or she would be the logical person to make the referral for the assessment. But in some districts, they're told, you can't refer, don't do it. And so, but that's another natural place in the system where the breakdown can occur, because the teacher is clearly aware that the child is having problems, and that triggers a duty. There's a low threshold for when you have to assess. If you have a suspicion that the person has a disability, you have to do the assessment. So that's another point in the system. And
so
then,
let me ask this, and maybe this is a ridiculous question, but if we've had like, let's say the child is in second grade, and in kindergarten and first grade, we have all these notes that we've kept a record of, that they said, oh, your child engaged in this behavior, did it, and they start talking about, what a problem your child is, maybe talking about expelling them. Is it reasonable for a lawyer to go back and go, you identified this many times, why did you not trigger child find?
Shannon, that's a great example. And it's also a great example of why you're so good at doing the show, which I was thinking about when I signed in this morning, but I'll save that for another point in time. But yes, that would be a defense to an attempt to remove the student from school via a manifestation determination.
Okay.
And that is one of the things that like, if you get a kid and they're about to be expelled and the district is planning on holding a manifestation determination, you could prepare for that manifestation determination by going in and saying, you should have had a suspicion that the child had a disability. There's a provision in the law that deals with having a suspicion of having a disability. And if the child should have had an IEP in place and he didn't, and he's being suspended, that's going to be, a defense to any attempt to expel the student. If you have the IEP and they're trying to expel the student, then you get into other issues about, whether the district essentially did everything it could to try to follow the child's IEP, and nonetheless they still can't manage or control his behavior. People don't get expelled that often, but if the audience is interested, at some time we could do a show about expulsion.
Yeah. Oddly enough, though, I think, Bonnie, while it doesn't happen that often, when it does happen, I think it's our families that are most in need of knowing what their rights are.
Well, that's a good point. So we could talk. I will talk about that sometime in the next few weeks. Going back to assessment, if we have more time, I don't know.
We've got about 3 minutes. I also have to, like, at some point we have to notify the man in the mask that he's on camera on live, because we don't have his permission. So he can't do anything on camera that we need to let him know that he's live.
You mean the gentleman that's painting my house? He's gone.
Okay. I just don't want to, like, we have to take in mind his rights that he's live. But we got about 2 minutes, Bonnie. Okay. What do you want to do with the 2 minutes?
Well, I guess apologize, first of all, that other people are walking through the backyard.
Oh, I tell you, it's like in COVID, it's like the cat and the dog. It's so interesting to see how other people are living.
Yeah.
Don't apologize. It's just a legal thing on my end, you know.
Got it. All right,
Here,
well,
I'll tell you what. We've got two questions, Bonnie.
all right.
The first one, Laura just wrote in and said, "How can we find a lawyer to support special education?" There's a perfect question.
What state is she in?
Good question. Laura, what state are you in? Write in and tell us as quickly as you can. And then Sarah wrote in and said, our daughter attends public school and has a great team. However, during our last conference, it was noted that she is behind academically. We're now wondering if we should send her to a private special needs school. Is it possible to get the local school district to fund her education at a special needs school if she is not thriving in the current school environment? And Laura wrote back and said she's in Texas. Two different
Well,
months.
Okay, in Texas, why don't you go to COPA and look up, there's an attorney there, Martin Cirkiel, Cirkiel. He'd be a good person to talk to about your question. As far as whether the district can be required to pay for private or non-public schools instead of a public school placement, the answer to that is yes, because the district has to offer a continuum of options, starting with the least restrictive and ending with the most restrictive. So if your student can't make it in general education, there's a whole workup and analysis that we do and a way that we set up a case in order to get the private education for the student. I would say the first thing you need to do if your student is struggling academically is, if there hasn't been a recent academic assessment, to ask for new assessments in cognitive, in other words, psychology and academics. And then once you get those reports, either they're going to help you to get a better idea of why the child is struggling academically, or if the evaluations are not strong, you can take them to a lawyer, and that lawyer will help you write a letter to try to get your evaluations paid for at public expense. So either way, go back and look and see when the last time your student was assessed. If it's been more than 2 years, you're not going to be able to attack that evaluation and try to get the district to pay for a private evaluation that's better. If all you will be able to do is either let the district reassess and then challenge their evaluation, or if you can afford to do it, you can kind of skip all those steps, and instead you can go out and pay for a private evaluation, which will get you a lot of very valuable information. And then if you file a lawsuit against the district, you can ask the district to reimburse you for that evaluation.
But let me really quickly ask you, Bonnie, for your opinion as both a seasoned expert in the field of special education, but also as a mom who's been there and done that. If you've got a team that's good and a team that's willing, but you're not hitting where you need to be academically, would you move to a private school, or would you bring in some help for the team that you have in the public school?
The answer to that is it depends. And the it depends has to do with whether the school is still open to having the child be served in the public school, or if the well has been poisoned. I have a 10-year-old girl. She's having a ton of behavior problems. She is sending other kids to the office by doing things like spraying them with hand sanitizer. She's really not like violent or scary, but she's causing a ton of disruption, and the school has turned against her. And so even though if we could get appropriate behavior support in her classroom, I think it could be successful. I told her parents that the school has made up its mind about her, and it would be too difficult and not realistic to assume they're going to change their mind anytime soon. And the way the school's treating the child is triggering behavior. So it depends on not only what the needs are, but also what the school climate is.
I love that answer, though. We are out of time, so tell us quickly where we can find you if we want to consult with you. I did send you a mom this week that hopefully I hope you got to connect with.
She reached
But
out to me, and I was thinking about her. I have to find out what happened. I haven't heard back from her. Could you reach out to her again and tell her I'm looking for her?
I did reach back out to her, and she's about to reach back out to you. So
Great. Okay,
we're all good.
Good.
So, but tell people where to find you.
Yeah, email byates@tollnerlawoffices.com, phone 310-245-1968. You can find me on the Tollner Law Offices website. Everybody have a good week. Thank you, Shannon.
All right. Thank you so much, Bonnie. I hope you get your house back soon. Much love. All right. Bye-bye. You guys, for tomorrow's show, it's Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy, and Ava Lund from Special Spirit is going to be with us. Ava has got a really new program that involves a drum circle. So I'm really excited for her to be here with us. She hasn't been here with us for a while. She owns the Special Spirit Ranch that does a lot of work with equestrian work, with horse therapy and with art therapy, and now a drum circle. So she's going to be here tomorrow with Nancy Alspaugh Jackson and myself. Until then, please give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now. If you found anything helpful in this video, please give us a like. In fact, make sure that you smash that subscribe button on YouTube and give us a like on Facebook. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Instagram for important updates. And please download our free podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much. See you next time.